You're listening to a CNA podcast.
Hi, this is Tiffany and Gerald on the Work It podcast. We've all been seeing news of layoffs recently, and that's always not something very nice to hear. In a previous episode where we discussed the signs before a company is headed for a retrenchment exercise, actually I was shocked to learn that there are organizations that retrench their staff at the end or even start of the year to avoid giving out bonuses.
Yes, if unfortunately you're one of them, or you've been retrenched yourself not too long ago, and you're now looking for employment, you'll want to stay on this podcast. Today we'll be talking about how to find your next job after you have been retrenched. With us in the studio today to give us some career advice is Tong. He's the head of Asia for HR recruitment firm Frazer Jones. Sean, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me here.
Sean, in your line of work, do companies tend to view a job applicant negatively if they've been retrenched before?
I would say yes and no. They still look at the candidate past employment history.
Okay.
So say if a candidate has about 10 years of experience and the news is made public, for example, company A going through retrenchment this year due to right-sizing exercise. I mean, this is public news and the candidate could explain himself or herself during the interview. And that's perfectly all right.
So what are some things that you would maybe advise companies when they, let's say, have an applicant on the table, they're looking at their resume and it says that they have been retrenched. What would you advise companies to look for when they're looking at such an applicant?
I think they should look beyond the current reason why they have been retrenched. Look at the skill sets they could bring on board and value add to the organization. And more importantly is the candidate himself or herself, meeting them in person. Do they fit the culture of the organization beyond the paper itself? But that said, it's very difficult to take away that unconscious biasness because we all know that Singapore market is very competitive, both locals or expats. The challenge is because of the competition, people who are without a job being immediately available always find it harder to get an interview opportunity as compared to someone who is currently in a job. This is just human behavior or hiring manager behavior.
So Sean, what you're saying is someone who is already working, who's still in a job, will be seen more positively by the next employer as compared to someone who's out of a job, even though the person is immediately available for work.
That's correct. I think the only difference is if companies are looking for someone urgently to fill the position, then that's when the pros and cons, being immediately available is an advantage.
I think a lot of people would be curious to know if today I'm being retrenched, what are my odds in being able to quickly get a job? A quick stat that I just pulled out. So according to the Manpower Ministry Labour Stats, they say that in Q2 last year, 2024, the re-entry rate was 55%. Then Q3, it went up to 60.4%. That's the resident rate of re-entry to the workforce within 6 months of retrenchment. So I'm thinking to myself, it is an improvement, but 60% is still not very high. So what would you say realistically is the re-entry rate for people? Like, what should I be expecting after I get retrenched?
On average, it takes between 3 to 6 months to find a new role in Singapore. And that depends on the industry demand and also economic conditions. Right? Things are slowly trying to get better compared to June 2023, which is 18 months ago, when you see a lot of tech firms going through layoffs, the big and the small. Skill set relevance in the current job market is also critical. The next will be seniority. Senior roles could take even longer than 6 months.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So the older you get, the harder it is to re-entry?
Not necessarily by age. There are people who are pretty senior early in their career.
Okay.
Right? Specifically the tech industry and financial services. So there are VPs or senior VPs who are at the age of 30. Plus minus. Some other factors influencing duration could be the strength of your network, right? If you stay connected to some of the strong professional networks out there, it could shorten the job search timeline.
If I were to add on to this point about the re-entry rate, 60.4%, this is of course average across every age group.
Yes.
I think if you distill down this rate into different age groups, you'll start to see that maybe certain age groups re-enter faster and certain age groups re-enter slower.
So obviously it's different for people who are younger. Maybe it's easier for them to come back into the job market. Also, probably because what they're going to command in terms of a salary will be slightly lower. So companies that are already right-sizing, they might take that cost into factor, right? Labor cost.
That's right.
This is something that I personally don't quite understand. Although it is the market dynamics, right?
Okay.
I don't quite understand this part because someone who has got a longer runway for a company, if you're willing to hire them first, they may not stay for very long as compared to someone who's older, who's a lot more experienced. If you can get them on a good package, they will likely stay longer.
Yeah, maybe 10, 15, they might go all the way until retirement for you, right?
Yeah, so for me, the current trend of hiring for hiring managers and what I think it should be, it doesn't quite match up, in my own opinion, right? I'm someone who values experience. So someone who's older and who's got a lot more experience and networks. And when you get older, you get more networks. Those come at a price as well. And surely the longevity of the tenure of work for them, I mean, I'm just speaking to all the employers out there, if you really are considering, why not think the other way as well? If everybody's going for the same fish, why not put your eyes on something else?
I think job flexibility matters as well, right? Singapore, people value being in a permanent job. So being open to contract, part-time or even consulting roles may be able to expedite employment. More and more companies are willing to give a year contract or 6 months contract before converting someone into perm.
Yeah, which brings me to something that I actually read on Reddit. So some people were saying, okay, if you have been retrenched and you're looking for employment, then a good start would be to look for maternity cover. And then that might actually translate to a permanent job later on. I think a lot of people might be wondering, how do I then put myself in a better position to get employment after I've been retrenched? Because we said earlier on that there is a bit of that stigma. What are sort of like immediate steps can we take, maybe in the first month after we've been retrenched?
This is a very common question we get this year, particularly in the market where it's quite volatile. I think the first thing is to acknowledge the situation. For many, they have never been retrenched before. So take a few days to process the news. It's difficult but not uncommon experience. Focus on the fact that retrenchment often reflects business decision, not personal failure. I think the mindset is very important. The next is refresh your resume. Look at LinkedIn profile. Look at updating your LinkedIn profile, your cover letter. That is critical because to some and to many, they have not done any work on their resume. They could be in the company for 10, 15 years, right? They don't know where to begin. So search for professional help. There's a lot of tools out there that can help individuals with their resume.
Yeah. Also from my own experiences, this year I had 5 friends who lost their jobs. 5 friends. And the thing is, they know what I'm doing, right? Career counseling.
Yes.
And they still come to me and they tell me like, I just want to let you know that I've just been let go. And I wish you keep this private.
Why?
Yeah, but a lot of them, because like what Sean was saying, right? It's like
There's a bit of a
stigma, shame, taboo. It's like you don't want people to know that you've been let go. But I feel like this is the time to tell people that, hey, I'm on the lookout for opportunities. I'm available now, and this is my value add. This is my skill set. Help me. Tell me, where can I go? Is there someone that you know that's looking for work? This is part of the acknowledgement process.
At least now you have more sources to help you to hunt in that sense.
And it's not just the hunting part, right? It's also the support that you get from people, knowing that there are 5 people out there who you trust and who also knows about you and willing to back you up and support you a little bit more. I think it just makes you feel like you're not alone in the journey.
Also, at the same time, it may not only be shame that they feel. It could be that it's hard to actually handle when you're telling people about something that's not so good that has happened in your life, and then people go, oh, I am so sorry, are you okay? And then suddenly you have to hold space for them, right? And then you have to explain to them that actually I'm okay. I am taking steps. And when you have to explain to the 20th person and to make them feel okay that you are not suffering, it's actually quite tiring. So maybe some of them would rather just go, you know what, I don't want to have to deal with someone else's emotions. I am okay and I would like to deal with my emotions myself.
Having been in the recruitment industry for almost 2 decades right now, I think the turning point is truly during COVID times because a lot of people's jobs are being affected. Then you see a lot of people posting. People who are affected posting on LinkedIn and to say, hey, I've been made redundant, I've been retrenched. They are very open in sharing. It's not being shameful of being retrenched. It's just a business decision. So when more of those voices are public, people are more willing to share those information, and that in turn help them to get more opportunity because they should reach out to their former colleagues, their former bosses, even friends and family to get the word out there.
Yes.
So even in Singapore right now, when we are seeing a lot of news of retrenchments and a lot of fears, it's actually a good thing
Yeah.
because employers are more receptive. There's this image that, okay, there's a lot of talent out there, right? And then whether you're retrenched or not, I can hire good people. The challenge here comes with if today the market is tight, if the labor market is very tight, there's very low unemployment and nobody is retrenching, and you got that unemployed person looking for a job, and the unemployed person has been looking for a job for more than 6 months.
Yes.
That is hard one. That's what I would call like a lemon. And employers will be wondering, are you a lemon?
Oh, okay.
Like nobody wants you, right? Because everybody's scrambling for people, but yet you cannot find a job for 6 months. What's wrong with you? Some employers will have that mindset. Yeah, so that's of course in a tight labor market. But right now, I think if today someone is retrenched, it's a really good opportunity to set your sights far.
Okay, let's say in that scenario, 6 months later, even up to a year, you've done everything you can, right? And still you haven't found any employment. Now what? Are you really a lemon? Or should you rethink about how you are planning things?
I think back to my earlier point, treat the job search like a project. Set daily and weekly goals. Say, for example, 5 applications per day, 2 networking calls, reach out to people, connect with people on LinkedIn, celebrate small wins. Because being out of a job for 6 months, applying for jobs, going for interviews and not getting a job offer is very demoralizing. So I think the mindset is critical. And then create structure in the day. So example, allocate time for job search, networking, upskilling, and then avoid burnout, balance job hunting with exercise, with hobbies. Still go for a short holiday. Don't take that away from your life.
I think the difficulty for many is how to fill up that void. So holidays is one, of course, right? Some people have to do caregiving, so that's another reason as well. But what I always advocate for people is maybe go and take some training.
Okay.
Use it as an opportunity to upskill yourself because it's so good for an employer to say, what have you been doing for the last 1 year? And then you're saying, I've been learning certain things. And we have to realize that when we go for training, it's not just acquisition of knowledge. We're also acquiring networks.
True.
We are having classmates that have their own networks. You're meeting people. When you make effort to go out for training, you're actually giving yourself a routine, a sense of purpose, right? It's like you're getting some pseudo-career life back because you're talking about the things that will propel you, help you to develop yourself into the future.
Yeah.
Don't be what we call the stay-at-home person who's just applying for jobs
And
at
just
home.
clicking refresh.
Behind a screen.
Yeah, just clicking refresh on your email box.
Yes, because like what Sean said, right, it can get very demoralizing.
I've seen people who took up courses and did a career switch as well during this time. They took 3 to 6 months, take up a course, go for interviews.
Easy for
network.
them to switch?
Yes and no. It has to be something still slightly relevant. So for example, like a retail operations manager could pivot into supply chain roles, right, within the industry.
I think what Sean pointed out is very important. The conversion is not something that is like a absolute different switch. That kind of big jump, right, it's quite unrealistic actually. Employers will not be willing to hire you outright for that limited training experience you have. But if you can identify some transferables between what you have and what you newly acquired as a knowledge to move into a adjacent role or nearby role, I think that it's a beautiful match that can be made.
So if potential employers quiz you, let's say they go, what happened during your retrenchment? Or you've been retrenched and you haven't had a job in like 4 months. How would you advise somebody who's going through that to respond in an interview?
My best advice is be authentic.
Okay.
Do not come up with something that you have not done before,
Okay.
right? I get this question
Don't
a
try
lot.
to smoke your way out
Exactly.
of it, right?
Right. It's like, Sean, what should I say during this 4 months? So my question back to them is, what have you actually done during this 4 months or 6 months? Have you been out there networking? Have you been taking a sabbatical? Take a break. If you haven't taken a break for 15 years or 20 years working, then taking 2 to 3 months break is fair, right? So if you're authentic and you're able to say that confidently during interviews, then the interviewer on the other side of the table will believe you. I don't suggest
Lying.
trying to lie during an interview because people can sense it.
I think being honest and authentic would be a great way to start. But sometimes if today the retrenchment is not known and employers ask, what made you leave your last job? Why did you leave your last job? Then you are in a position that where do you say or do you not say, right?
Yeah.
So in those situations,
Do
I
you
always,
say?
I will just tell them that you can disclose what you feel comfortable with.
Okay.
But at the same time, try to divert the conversation towards more of yourself and the job, on the prospective job. So what I mean is you're not lying, but you're just saying that, the company was having some difficulties. As part of restructuring, I was given a package and I felt it was the right time to go. More importantly, there's this other opportunity that your company has for me. And I can see how these things that you're offering is such a good fit for me. I'm really interested to join. It's almost like making the employer feel like you have quit your company to join them.
Yeah, you just didn't mention the R word.
Yes.
Don't focus on that. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Because employers don't want to see a potential hire to be carrying baggage from the past. More importantly, they want to know, what can you do for me? Can you really value add to my business? Can you contribute? Can you do something? Yeah. So I think we need to always emphasize that fit and why you're interested in this new company.
It's very common these days where retrenchment or right-sizing exercise is due to a business decision.
Exactly.
Which is a shutdown of a business unit, a region not doing well. That's why they are removing a certain layer within the organization. Touch and go, right? Don't focus too much on why you're being laid off or why you're the selected one.
Yeah.
Focus on what's there and why you're interested in the role and why you're there at the interview.
Yeah, on that point, right? If today an employer really wants to know, really, are you saying the right things? Then that's where your referees come in. Your character referees that you provide, they will be the ones to vouch for your performance. So if you could get a referee that's from your past job,
Yes.
right? Then it sends a signal that actually you were not like a bad hire.
Yeah.
Your last employer was willing to vouch for you. And during COVID, we saw a lot of that, right?
Many.
Exactly.
Be daring enough to ask for introductions.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Applying
before
for
you
the job,
leave.
you would be 1 in 1,000, 1 in 500, right? So how can your CV stand out? It's through recommendation, through references.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are so many valuable tips and insights that we've talked about today. And I hope that whoever's listening to this podcast and feeling a bit down, maybe they would go, hey, you know what? Okay, today is the day I'm going to try and do something. Even if it's just to take that 3-month sabbatical, like you say, give yourself a break. It is okay. Give yourself permission to have a break. So thank you so much, Sean, for coming on our podcast today. We really enjoyed having you here.
Thank you so much for
Thank
having me
you.
here. Really enjoy my time.
Hi, it's our Ask Me Anything segment. So let's get straight into it. Today's one is sent in by Andy. Andy is in an awkward social situation with a colleague. See, what happened is, okay, I'll read this out. Andy says, I didn't invite a colleague to my wedding, but I did invite some others. He is offended, and I'm worried that this will affect our working relationship because he also blocked me on social media. What should I do? I know some people might be thinking, hey, it's a straightforward one, right? Don't care what this colleague thinks. It's your wedding, Andy, and you decide who makes the list or not. But I don't think Andy is regretting his decision here. The problem is, he thinks it's going to affect the working relationship, and likely so because, sounds like this colleague is not very mature in the way that he's dealing with it. So, Gerald, what do you think Andy should do?
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like something that all of us worry about, whether we are going for like an important event like a wedding, who should we invite? And we get limited tables. So we really have to invite the right people. And unfortunately, some people must be left out.
Yeah.
Right? So unfortunately, Andy, I think if your colleague blocked you on social media for this reason, then maybe your colleague really felt really left out and sidelined by you. So I think maybe you want to consider this, whether you feel that it's reasonable for your colleague to respond to you in this way.
Okay.
Right? What I mean by reasonable is if today this is someone who has been lunching with you, who has been talking to you, you've been going out a lot, even after work drinks, you chat a lot, you work very closely, and then to find out that this person is not in that list for the wedding,
Okay.
then it means something, right? So first, Andy, you got to consider whether...
Were you sending wrong signals?
Yeah, correct. I mean, you can imagine if today someone that's very close to you didn't invite you for something important, but yet invited somebody that's seemingly not so close to you at the workplace.
Okay.
Right? Then you'll be asking a lot of questions like, why am I not invited? So I think, Andy, the colleague's action to block you on social media could be their own way to cope with their disappointment.
And it's not something you can control.
Yeah, you cannot be like the social media police and say, hey, why do you block me? And then it's going to make things really awkward. So that's not a very realistic thing, confronting them. It's not a realistic thing, and it will even seem petty to do so. So I think go about your work with this colleague, and then along the way, if you observe certain behaviors or changes in terms of how you're working together, maybe you want to have the clear the air conversation to try to find out like what happened. I noticed certain things are different. The way we interact with each other is different. Maybe you want to have a chat about it. Yeah. Then if this wedding thing comes up, then maybe you can apologize and you can say, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Then you can explain your limitations as well.
Yeah. I mean, between the two of us, I'm more of the confrontational type of character, right? But actually, I think in this case, there's no need to try and highlight. Don't need to say, hey, let's sit down and then let's have a chat because I noticed things are a bit awkward, frosty between us. Is it because I didn't invite you to my wedding? I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah.
Because I think let that matter pass, right? It's one of those things that I feel perhaps even upon reflection, and these colleagues might also think, maybe that wasn't the most mature way to deal with things. It's perfectly fine to continue to try and separate work from pleasure. So work with your colleague Andy like you usually do. Maybe go back to inviting your colleague back for lunches if you have been doing so, right? So just say, hey, you want to go for lunch? If your colleague says no, then okay, so be it. But if your colleague says, yeah, okay, sure, that's also a way for them to try and mend things without pointing out the elephant in the room.
That's right.
Yeah. And if in doubt, Andy, just name your firstborn after this colleague, right? Easy. This person will forgive you. Well, if like Andy, you have a work-related question, do write into us. We are at cnapodcasts@mediacorp.com.sg. Otherwise, you can find us on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. The team behind the Work It podcast is Crispina Robert, Joanne Chan, Junaini Johari, and Saye Win. Sound mixing by Carrie Lim, video by Hanida Amit.
I'm Gerald.
And I'm Tiffany. Have a good lunch this week.